Welcome to our summer series, Stories of Faith. I am your host, Dr. Ferguson, and today we're going beyond the mic on a journey of faith, media, and transformation. We have a super special guest joining us today, Joe Paulo, the president and CEO of Hope Media Group. Joe brings a wealth of experience and passion for media, leadership, and ministry. Since stepping into his role in 2018, Joe has led Hope Media to new heights, fostering a mission to engage people in loving Jesus, serving others, and spreading hope. With a background that spans everything from operations to donor relations and broadcasting, he's been instrumental in shaping Hope Media's impact across the nation. Today, we'll be chatting about Joe's journey, from his personal faith story in early years in radio to his vision for the future of Christian media. Guys, you don't want to miss this. Joe, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so thrilled to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So just really quick, we don't want to give any spoilers, but tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, my name is Joe Paulo, and I'm the CEO of Hope Media Group based in Houston, Texas.
Don't you love Houston?
I do.
I do too.
Love Texas.
Me too.
The country of Texas.
The whole country of Texas. And the traffic doesn't even bother me.
No. We moved here and we realized that people love to complain about the heat and the traffic, but that's just part of life in Houston and Texas.
Well, especially if you're from Alabama. So number one, the humidity is way worse in Alabama.
Oh.
Traffic's not a problem, but humidity is. And so when we moved here and everybody was like, oh my gosh, we have to drive 30 minutes to work. And I'm thinking, we live in the country. Everything's 30 minutes. Like,
that's right.
Is that really a problem?
That's right.
But now we've been here going on 8 years, and my husband has started the whole, I really don't want to have to drive 30 minutes. I said, oh, we are officially Texans.
20 minutes is like next door.
To me it is, but not to people around here. I don't get it, man. I don't get it, but there's some things we're never going to figure out.
No.
But that's okay. All right, so Joe, we're going to just start with your earlier years. And so tell us what it was like growing up as a preacher's kid, especially with, I know bits and parts of your story, but how your parents had a conversion to Christianity and now you're a preacher's kid. Like, how in the world did you manage that?
Yeah, no, it was such a privilege. My parents had a conversion to Jesus when they were 30 years old. I was a baby, so I didn't really know what they were like before that, but they came to Christ and they decided to pack up the whole family and move to Georgia to go to Bible college. So I grew up in this Christian environment where we saw God do miracles. I mean, there were times where we sat down at the dinner table and we literally didn't have any food in the house. My dad would pray, and at the end of the prayer, there'd be a knock on the front door.
I was about to ask you, did somebody knock on the front door?
Yes. Like it happened twice with food in their hands.
Wow.
So it was such a privilege to grow up. And I know I've used the word Christian bubble before, but and I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but it just means that I had a Christian family. You know, I went to a Christian school. I was privileged to do that. I was in church pretty much whenever the doors were open because my dad was a pastor. And I think what I saw was God's hand through my parents in a powerful way and them living out their faith in such a genuine way. But the downside was I had to reach a point where the faith became my own. And that actually, Miranda, didn't happen until I was in my early 40s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now that I did not know.
I know. New information.
New information. I love that. Okay. So if that's the case, it was in your 40s, and you said you lived in a Christian bubble. So automatically people would assume that if you lived in a Christian family with doing the church every time the door opens and all the good stuff, that it would have really shaped your life in a way where automatically out the gate, boom, there you go. So how did you end up before you grasped your faith for your own self?
Yeah, let me explain that. So I did commit my life to Jesus when I was a little kid, but waiting until I was in my early 40s to make faith my own meant this. Like, I never was serious about my faith because it was kind of the world in which I lived. And so I would say I was lukewarm, and it was in my early 40s, and I was leading a radio station at the time, and we were trying to get people to read the Bible through in a year, and I realized I had never done that. And I tried 2 or 3 years in a row, and I'd get stuck in Deuteronomy like most people.
Well, I think Ecclesiastes.
Yeah, I mean, that's some thick stuff to get through.
Is.
But in 2011, I was able, by the grace of God, to read from cover to cover, and I never had, and it changed my life. And that's when I consider myself getting serious about my faith, and it affected my wife and affected our whole family.
Oh, absolutely. So here's a secret. I'll tell a secret. So I've tried several times to read through the Old Testament. Now, if you counted it as reading it splotchy like this, and this, I've read most of all of it, but I wanted to do the same thing. But dadgum, Ecclesiastes and Deuteronomy, I would get to a point and then life would be happening. So in September this year, I decided to jump in on the Bible recap with Tara Lee Cobble and start in the New Testament. And then I was just said, that's it. I'm going from the New Testament to the Old Testament. Maybe it'll work that way. And so I am, what is this, December? So I have till the 31st and I will have finished the New Testament. And even though I'm in ministry and I do ministry and I've been reading it, there is something about just reading it straight through and the revelations that come from that. I have had in the last couple of weeks, so many moments where I went, oh my gosh, I just didn't see it that way.
Yeah.
It just mind blown.
Well, and something that reading it cover to cover does, and I'm a big picture guy, so I love taking a step back and looking, what is the whole story from cover to cover? And that's what reading the Bible all the way through does. And it also created a discipline, right? I had a literal reading plan that I checked off each day, and that built the discipline into my life that I needed.
Yeah, absolutely. So big shout out to Bible Recap because it's getting it done for me.
Yes.
Okay, so you initially pursued a degree in math, correct?
Right.
At Liberty University.
Yes.
And then you went in the trenches and taught in middle school for 4 years.
Ooh.
And I say that because I know, because I was an educator myself, 20 years in public school education. So when I say the trenches, I mean the trenches.
Yes.
How did
Hats off to you.
I covered middle school, elementary school, high school, and then moved into higher education and said I would never go back ever. So how did that experience impact you? And did you learn skills there that you are able to apply in leadership today?
It impacted me in a huge way. And I would say this, it helped me learn what God had created me to do. I went into math education because I didn't know what else I was going to do. I'd always been good at math, and you'd go to college and you got to declare a major. And I'm like, I don't know. I guess I'll be a math teacher. That's literally how I ended up going into math education. Even though I look back and there were all these markers that God had placed in my life trying to, Joe, I want you to go into media, Christian music, radio, and all that. And I guess I'm a little too thick. So it taught me about what my passions are. And then in terms of leadership, even in a classroom of middle schoolers, you can learn. Leadership is all about people, right? And so even in a classroom of middle schoolers, you can learn a lot about leadership and trying to take a group of people and move them in a certain direction. A little more challenging in middle school.
Absolutely.
And man, teachers have my lifelong admiration because it's a true calling.
Oh, it's
wasn't
definitely
mine.
It's a true calling, and I was disappointed when I felt the calling had shifted because I really did love it. If you're a true teacher, it's in you. Even if you go every day and you're like, how am I going to do this? You can't wait to go back the next day and do it again.
Well, and I remember going home thinking my math teacher mentor, this lady that was much further along in her career, she just exuded this passion for teaching. And I'd go home kind of thinking, there must be something wrong with me because I don't feel quite that way.
Right. Nah, it's okay. That was just a stepping stone.
Yes.
Just a stepping stone. Okay. So family life, briefly tell us about the Paulo family.
Oh, my wonderful wife, Kelly. We've been married almost 35 years now, and we have 5 kids, 3 daughters and 2 boys and 3 grandkids.
We have 5 boys.
Nice.
Yeah, so I feel you. It's a crazy household, huh?
It is a crazy household. Which is harder to raise, boys or girls?
Well, I don't know. I don't have girls. I have a girl dog. She's pretty easy.
Okay, well.
When all you know is boys, I have a sister, and then, of course, there's me, but I didn't have to raise either one of us. So I feel like boys are super easy, though.
You know what? That's the conventional wisdom, but I will say that my wife and I would say it's the opposite.
Want to switch? I'll give you 5 boys and you can send me a girl. I can see for myself.
Don't want to switch, but the boys have their own set of challenges.
I think they both do.
Yeah,
they both do, for sure. Okay, so teaching for 4 years, and then you pivot to radio.
Yeah.
You're teaching and then you pivot, which was suggested by your wife.
Yeah. She's smart. She's got a lot of wisdom.
It sounds like it. So tell us how that journey started. And you said in an interview that you fell in love with it. And you just said that teaching, you never went home just being like, yes, yes, yes. So what made you fall in love with radio?
I had always, from the earliest ages, loved radio. I remember laying on the floor listening to radio after I'd get home from school. I loved Christian music. I've always been in Christian music. I never really went through a mainstream music phase, which makes me a little odd. So,
You definitely had the Christian bubble. Yeah.
Yeah. So my wife and I had gotten married. She was a year ahead of me. So she had already graduated from college with her degree. And I needed a part-time job to help pay the bills while I was finishing school. And it was her idea for me to go down and apply at this Christian radio station. I'm like, they're not going to hire me, but they did. And I realized I just loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved being in the studio, playing the music. I used to put programs on, and then I would get to do the weather forecast in between, and I'd call Kelly, my wife, how did it sound? And she's like, how did what sound? I'm like, well, the weather
You
forecast.
mean she wasn't listening to you?
And she's like, it's the weather. I know, but how did it sound?
I love that. It sounded like the weather.
Yes.
So I haven't had a lot of experience in a radio station, but the way I met you was through Taylor, your night DJ. And I did have an experience with Taylor where I came to the station one night with her for a couple of hours, and she showed me the station and how it worked. And I was just like, oh, this is so cool. So I could see how radio could be pretty enticing and fun. There were so many elements that you don't realize as a listener. Radio music is what I enjoy most. I'm not a TV watcher, don't get into all that, but I love music. And I was a big Delilah fan for many years as I drove from Alabama to Houston once a month, and it was the only thing on worth listening to. And but as a listener, that's you just hear the voices, but you don't know what's happening. Yep. So to watch Taylor in action was pretty cool. And it gave me a whole new respect for you guys and what you do. I gotta tell you.
It takes talent. I'm no longer on the air because there are people that can do it much, much better than I ever did. On. But it's beautiful. One of the things that I love about it is that it can penetrate and reach people wherever they are.
Yeah.
So somebody may be in their kitchen at home. Somebody may be in their car. Somebody may be destitute, down and out. Somebody may be on a wonderful high after a great day.
Yep.
But it has that common thread of reaching into people's lives.
Yeah, I love it. So as much as you loved it, though, there was a period where the passion for radio started to fade. So looking back, what do you think contributed to that? And then how did that affect your path forward?
Yeah, it was because I was in a season where I had been placed in a leadership position while still being on the radio. And so I was trying to do both things, and I was quickly realizing I'm doing probably a half lousy job at both.
Right.
So which one am I going to really focus on? And I chose the path. I'm so glad that the Lord allowed me to. I chose the path of leadership. And Kelly later was like, I thought you wanted to get into radio to be on the air. And I'm like, I think that was the fish hook that God put in my mouth just to pull me in.
Yep.
Because I developed such a love for leadership and vision and managing people and taking the organization forward. And like I said a moment ago, there are a lot more talented people at being on the radio than I was. And it's hard work. But
it's such a good experience that you have been in their seat, right? Because then you can understand their struggles and the good things, the rewards that come. Because if you were just in management, then it would be hard to relate, I would think. Yeah. So it's kind of, maybe he did it on purpose.
You can definitely see the hard work that it takes for them to be successful. Having been there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm glad you mentioned your transitions because you were at a small FM station in Charlotte, right? In the beginning?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then you became general manager by 30. And so moving from being a DJ and now you're the general manager, how did that prepare you for some of these larger roles that I'm sure you had no idea would be coming down? What did you learn? What did you learn in that season, making that shift?
Well, I learned a lot of things not to do.
Well, those are the best.
Right? And looking back, it's like, oh, yeah, if I could go back, I would have done so many things differently. But it's that season that God wastes nothing. I've heard a friend that said, God is always preparing you in the now for the next. And so even in that season where I was still wet behind the ears as a leader and I'm trying to figure out which way is up, and I remember thinking, I mean, our budget is going to be that much? And it was a small number. But I was learning about vision, and I was learning about big relationships and working with donors and how to lead teams and all those things that God has used in bigger ways, thankfully.
I love that. So then we fast forward to 2018. You become president and CEO of Hope Media Group after being the vice president of operations at KSBJ. So here you go. You're climbing the ladder. Clearly, we're climbing the ladder. So what was it like to step into that role? And what were your initial goals for holding that down and being there in that capacity?
Well, there's a little bit of a journey that I'll try to distill into a succinct story. When I was in Charlotte, the stations were ultimately sold, and I and the rest of our team lost our jobs. And it began a season where God began showing me many things in my heart that needed to be cleaned out, namely pride, right? I began to probably identify a little bit too much with my title and my role. And so then all of a sudden that rug is pulled out from underneath you and you realize how much identity you had placed in that. And so there was kind of this almost 3 year, we call it the wilderness season of my career, where God was just revealing all that. And I was learning, okay, where are my strengths and where are my giftings and what am I called to do? And I could see examples of good leadership and examples of bad leadership. So then when I came to Houston, and the leader at the time, an amazing man, been here for a long time, done some amazing things, and he was still going to be here for another 10 years. And then all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, God impressed upon him to move on, and I'm thrust into this position. And I think what it brought about was this humility. Like, I've been given this responsibility in this position by God for a season, because my season someday will end too. So how can I do that to the best of my ability? And so stepped into it and have just had an absolute ball with it. I mean, we started out by really refining the mission and re-looking at our vision for the future and getting laser focused, because the organization, even at that time, had already been around for 35, 36 years. And you have to ask yourself, well, is what's gotten here over the last 35, 36 years going to get us 35 or 36 years into the future? And the answer is no. You've got to adapt to times, and like most other industries, media changes. So how are we going to be relevant 35, 40 years into the future? So we began to make some adjustments and start planning even more significantly for the future.
So Christian radio has a unique mission, yet it operates as a business. How do you balance the business aspect with your mission to engage people in loving Jesus and spreading hope?
I love that question for a couple of reasons. And I know, I don't think you meant this way, but sometimes people will ask that question and they're creating a false premise, meaning that somehow business is in conflict with ministry. And I heard a pastor one time that said, business is not the activity of working against the Holy Spirit. Under his control, it's the outworking of the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
So I wrote a little series of articles for our team called Dirty Words, and one of them was business.
Oh, I love that.
Because sometimes in ministry, business is considered
absolutely
a dirty word. And I remember he was actually the president of a Christian university. He said, every believer is either a ministering professional or a professional minister.
Yep.
But we're all in ministry. So when it comes to the business versus ministry, I don't think there's a versus in there.
Right.
You have to operate a ministry with good business principles. Otherwise, there will be no ministry taking place.
Absolutely. So while we're on the thought of ministry versus business and worldly perspectives, how do you navigate worldly pressures while fostering a Christian environment, both with your team and in your audience outreach?
Yeah, that's a big question because our society is changing so rapidly, and
kidding.
we're entering quickly a post-Christian era for the United States of America. When we look at our team, we've got to be united around our biblical beliefs. We're grateful that the laws of the land protect Christian organizations to truly be Christian. And so we have people of different denominations. We have a diverse staff, but we all can agree and unite around our statement of faith. But then when it comes to the audience, man, we want anybody and everybody.
Absolutely.
Like, it doesn't matter what you believe. We hope that we can engage you through our media platforms. We do want to lead you in a certain direction, but that's how we approach the world in which we live.
So I want to make sure, because we're about to get into Hope Media a little more, that people understand, because I didn't really understand this until I was at an event with Hope Media. I thought KSBJ was just KSBJ, right? But KSBJ is a part of Hope Media. But there's other parts of Hope Media as well. So, sorry. Can you tell us what Hope Media is and some of the different branches? Because I don't know that everybody understands that.
Yeah, the simplest way I like to describe it is Hope Media Group is a multi-platform ministry. So KSBJ is one of our platforms. It's a big one. It reaches Houston. God's blessed it with a lot of success. We've been the number one station in Houston many, many months this year. But that's just one of the platforms. We have another platform. It's known as Way FM, and it's Christian music radio that's in a bunch of different cities around the U.S., from Florida to Tennessee to Dallas and Colorado and a bunch of other places in between. We have a Spanish language station that is now in Houston and in Miami and New York. We have a digital platform called Hope Nation. I won't go through all of them, but
you have many more than just
platforms,
KSBJ.
and those all make up Hope Media Group.
Yeah, I love that. Alex said I had no clue. I was blown away. I was like, oh, there's more of them.
Yes.
That's so amazing. So with that being said, Hope Media reaches a very diverse audience, including those who may not even follow Christ or be living a godly life or anything to do with Christ at all. So how do you connect with non-believers while staying true to your faith-based mission?
Yeah, your question touches on the misnomer. Sometimes people think, oh, Christian media, you're just preaching to the choir. All the serious, really good Christians engage with you. And no, actually the opposite is true. We do have a very diverse audience. We did a study a couple of years ago of our audience for KSBJ. And what was shocking, if you divide our audience into two groups, one group being those that are really engaged with the Bible, and then the other group of our audience not really engaged with the Bible, those that are not engaged with the Bible, 40% of them do not believe or are unsure there is such a thing as moral absolute authority. That was shocking to me.
That's a huge number.
And even those that were engaged with God's word, 20% of them either are not sure or don't believe there's moral absolute authority. So the big takeaway for us was like, what an opportunity that we have to speak into people's lives. And we consider it a spiritual continuum, right? On one end, you've got somebody that they're not even sure what this whole thing about the gospel means. And then you've got somebody on the other end that's a mature, seasoned Christian. And we get to engage all of them. And our job and our responsibility and our calling is how can we move everybody one step closer? So that's why you've got a variety of different ways that we engage people. Listening to Christian music on the radio. We also have prayer. We also have Bible studies online. But they're all ways that we can engage people and move them forward, no matter where they are spiritually.
Yeah, I love that. You guys have an amazing prayer team. I've seen you out in the community, but I also, because I visited the station, got to meet them and see how they operate. And they sent some prayer bears home for my kids, and they were a great group of guys. It was really an amazing experience. And I was actually lucky enough to be there during it wasn't during. It was right before you were going to do one of your fundraisers, the Share-a-thon, I believe. And so I got to see like what that looks like and everything that goes behind that. And it's pretty impressive too. It's pretty amazing. Like, again, as a listener, you visualize what you think things look like, but to be on ground zero and see the effort and the work and the heart behind it is a completely different experience.
It's humbling to be a part of it. It really is.
So you mentioned, streamlining when you came into your role and, just making sure what was working will take you forward. And you touched on technology. And so because I was there and I watched how the process worked and I follow the app, I follow all the pages on Instagram, I programmed on my radio in my car. I see that your DJs do a lot more than just DJ. They're putting out social media clips. They're doing some of these devotionals you're talking about. They're speaking just words of encouragement through the week. So I'm guessing when you first got into radio, those things weren't really happening so much. Social media really wasn't a thing. Can you believe that? It wasn't a thing.
Oh, you're being very kind. I'm old enough to remember before email, and we would send out paper memos.
Well, if it makes you feel better, me too. So, I remember when we first got a laptop and email was a thing, and we're like, what is that?
Yes.
Email?
Yes. Who's going to use that?
Yeah, who's
really?
going to do that? So as great as technology is, in all aspects of life, we find where it can be challenging or have issues. So what challenges do you guys face with new technology and maintaining listener engagement, especially as media consumption shifts?
Yeah. Well, that's the nail on the head, right? We're not a radio company. And that's been the journey that we've been on the last 6 or 7 years, is transitioning from thinking of ourselves as a radio company, which is using a specific mode of communication to people, to no, we are about media. And so we want to use what's relevant. And you look at the statistics, I mean, it's mind-numbing. This is why we're in such a unique position to reach people with the love of Jesus, because we're in a media-saturated, a media-crazy culture. 12 and a half hours a day. 12 and a half hours a day is how much media is consumed by the average American. And even on your smartphone, 5 hours a day. And that's not talking and texting.
It's
that's
not business.
Like consuming content. So the challenge for us is, how do we stay relevant? How do we stay connected to people, even though the ways that people consume media are changing? So that's why we've been transitioning from not just being a radio company, but to being a multi-platform organization.
Yeah, I love that you say that we're not just a radio company. Like it's not our bread and butter.
Yeah.
We're way more than that. I love that. I think that's what makes you guys set apart and different, is that you're looking at the bigger picture. It's not just this is what we do and we do it well, but this is what we do. Like you guys are encompassing so many things and doing them all so very well.
Well, at the risk of a well-worn story that I'm sure many people are familiar with, in 2007 was about Blockbuster's most profitable year. And 2007 was also one of the very first years that Netflix was even beginning to turn a profit. And remember, they were just mailing out the videos in the little red envelopes.
Right.
My wife and I used to subscribe.
Oh, so you're part of the reason why Blockbuster went under.
Yeah, exactly. So at the time that Blockbuster was the most profitable, Netflix was investing in something that Americans couldn't even do yet. They were investing in streaming movies, but people didn't even have the bandwidth and the internet access to stream movies, but they were looking to the future. And of course, we all know what happened to Blockbuster, and we all know what has happened to Netflix growing into a media giant.
Yeah, sad story.
Yeah.
I loved Blockbuster. We would go there on the weekends and rent
There's
movies.
still one open, I think, in the Pacific
kind
Northwest.
and rewind.
Yes.
There's my childhood memories. Okay, so this is actually one of my favorite parts of what we're doing today. Recently, one of Hope Media stations, KSBJ, I might be a little partial because I'm here in Houston, have a dear friend there, held a top spot on the charts for months, which is unprecedented achievement. What are your thoughts on this, and what impact has this had on your mission and your team?
You know, it's demonstrated to our team that even when you are focused on faith in things of God, that it's not an impediment to being successful. In fact, people are hungry for things of God. People are hungry for hope. And so seeing KSBJ go to number one multiple times this year has been an encouragement that like God is doing something special. He's given us a big platform, and we have an opportunity to encourage people, but also to influence them. I like to think of it this way too, that excellence breeds excellence. And so when you see that, oh, okay, we've attained number one in the radio ratings, well, that's a level of excellence that we want to continue and that we want to build upon. And excellence in an organization can drive away mediocrity, just like mediocrity in some organizations will drive away excellence.
So when I first met you, I was at a meeting that was I would say it was very casual but informative. You we were in somebody's beautiful home, and we were talking all things radio and music. But then there came a time where you spoke and told about the future of what was coming. And it was one of the first things I really noticed about you is your heart and your passion. Because as you spoke about what was coming up, because I believe you were like real thick in the fundraising part still of this vision, you could just see that A, you were super excited, and B, you were super determined. Like I know this is right, and I know this is the vision God's spoke, and we're moving forward. And it really made me super excited. Like, you were so excited that I left and I was super excited. I'd never been to the station ever. I'd listened to it often, but all of a sudden I left with this super excitement about what was going on. And so all that talk was about Hope Media expanding into a new space. And so will you tell us about this new space and the opportunities that it's going to bring for the future of your ministry and reaching more listeners?
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited about the new space, but I first have to say, and I know you know this, but like, this is not a job to us, right? Like, I believe that God has uniquely positioned us. And so we feel it deep, deep in our soul. And we see the growing gap between church and society. And it's like, we have this opportunity to leverage media. And man, we are not here just to encourage people. We do want to encourage people, but we're not here. I think what I meant to say is we're not here to just entertain people with great music. We really want to see God do transformative work. So part of that big vision for the future is going into a new space that is equipping us and our team to use media for the future. So like the physical facility that we're located in right now, it was built for one radio station years and years and years ago. Well, as we were just talking a few moments ago, Hope Media Group is not just one radio station anymore. It's multiple platforms, multiple radio stations, digital, videos, all that stuff. So the new facility that we'll be moving into is the long-term future, and it's a modern space. It's state-of-the-art, but it's built for the kinds of media platforms that are available now. And it's also a very collaborative space, a lot more open, whereas the traditional closed offices and kind of everybody off doing their own thing, this is much more equipped for the future, and it's going to set us up for decades to come.
So I've seen sketches from the meeting, of course, and then other things. It is absolutely beautiful. Now, I've seen it in person, clearly. It is beautiful, stunning. And I've also seen the other space, which there are some people functioning and running radio in very small little rooms.
In broom closets.
Yes, I wasn't going to say they were in closets, but y'all, they're in closets, but still doing it well.
Let me move this mop out of the way so I can turn on the microphone.
Can you move that chair so we can just step to the right for a second? So where are you in the new facility process? Where are you guys today?
Yeah, it is on schedule to be open in mid-2025. So we'll be moving in, and it's well underway. We cannot wait. I've been telling people this, that not only is it going to be nice to move into a new space that's state-of-the-art, but it's going to be a visible manifestation of this journey that we've been on, that we've just been talking about, right? Of going from a single radio station or a radio-focused company to being a multi-platform company that has this strong vision, and God is using in powerful ways. And it's going to be something that you can touch and feel and smell as you walk into it. So I had a wonderful compliment recently. I was walking somebody through and giving them a hard hat tour, and I just thanked God after they made this compliment. They said, wow, This facility looks like you have struck the perfect balance between being economical, but yet being beautiful, right? Because as a donor-supported organization, we want to be wise stewards with the resources that we've been given. So we want things to be nice and appropriate, but you can't be too nice. So
Right. Yeah.
This person at least said we struck the right balance.
Well, that I would make them write that down, sign it, and put it on the wall
that's right.
somewhere, so you can say, "Remember, look right here."
Yes.
Okay, so now, especially looking ahead to 2025 and this big move that's about to take place, what is the vision for Hope Media, and what do you see as both obstacles and opportunities?
Yeah. Well, the big vision is to continue to grow the platforms that we have because they have such a foothold already, and there's ways to continue to grow them. But I would say it's twofold in our major emphasis, and that is continue the outreach into the Spanish language population. As you know, the demographics have shifted so much, not just in Texas, but around the nation. And that group whose heart language is Spanish has been largely ignored in the Christian space, at least in terms of media. So we've stepped boldly into that. We believe that God is using Houston to not just launch rocket ships, but to launch ministry that will reach people whose heart language is Spanish. And as I mentioned earlier, we're not only in Houston, but also in Miami and New York, and we believe that God's going to continue to grow that. That's number one. Number two is to really continue to grow in this digital space. So we mentioned how much people use their smartphones for consuming content. There's a lot of untapped potential that we have to use digital media, especially through people's phones, to connect them to love Jesus and serve others and spread hope. So we're really pushing in those two ways for the future, Spanish and digital.
So in an interview you did, you mentioned a Coke versus Pepsi story in relation to like industry competition, because still it's still business. There are other radio stations who play Christian music and do all the things. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about that, especially in the light of the fact that you guys did spend several months in a top position in a Houston market, which is a pretty big accomplishment. I mean, I know I said that a minute ago, but it really is a huge accomplishment.
Yeah. It's the nation's 6th largest radio market. So it's huge. There's a great book. Have you ever heard of Rooting for Rivals? It's by Peter Greer, and he talks about Christian ministries and churches sometimes being a little bit too much of a rivalry with each other. And he talks about the Lord's Prayer, and when Jesus said, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done," is too big for any one person. It's too big for any one church or one organization. So we certainly don't view others doing Christian media as competition. We're not rivals. Our competition is a worldview that is in opposition to Scripture. So our challenge for the future is, how do we beat the worldview competition? So when you look at the Houston market, for example, and KSBJ is the number one station, to me that's a great sign that the worldview that we're projecting, that is based on the Bible, is winning the hearts and minds of many, many people, hundreds of thousands of people, compared to what our friends in the mainstream are putting out on radio. So that's where our competition is.
Yeah, I love that. I because that might not be the answer you would get from everybody. You know what I mean? But I think that answer right there really shows your heart, which is something I said that in talking with you, you just see that. It just pours out of you. And I love that. Good. I love that. Okay, so let's talk about like listener trends. So in an era where FM usage is slowly declining from 88%, from the 90%, which was 4 years ago, how do you adapt while remaining a steady presence in people's lives through radio, especially since radio is not your business?
Yeah. Well, you have to use data-informed decisions. I mean, we can look at demographic trends. We can look at radio usage. Here's something interesting, Miranda. In the Spanish language space, more people use radio and younger people use radio than in the English-speaking space. So that speaks into our growth area when I was talking about growing the Spanish radio outreach. So, but it goes back to looking at digital. How do we grow digital? Because that can engage across all age demographics. Certainly, radio in the traditional sense is going to be influential for a long time. For the last 25 years, people have been predicting the death of radio, and it's still reaching 85% of Americans on a weekly basis. And while that is being diluted, that's just compelling us to say, well, what do we need to be doing for the future? And that's moving into the digital space more and more.
Okay, so we're gonna shift it and get a little personal with Joe.
Uh-oh.
Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready.
It's not that bad, I promise. In a fast-paced, metrics-driven environment, how do you stay grounded in your faith and maintain humility, especially with the success that the Hope Media Group has had under your leadership? There's a lot of your in you there. You see that?
Yeah. Two things. I have to stay rooted in my time in the Word. And you know it, everybody knows, the temptation is to get up in the morning, grab that cup of coffee, and immediately hop onto email and just dive into the day. And what I find is that I have to stay rooted in spending time in the Word and spending time in prayer first. And it's counterintuitive because you would think, well, you're taking 30 minutes out that you could be doing on email or whatever. But God has a way of multiplying that time back to me. So that's number one. And number two is I've learned over the years about the borrower's principle. You know, you were probably taught by your parents like I was, that when you borrow something, you ought to return it better than it was, than you found it.
Right.
And I look at that in terms of my position, right? I am not going to be in this position forever. I'm borrowing, or I've been given this position for a season. So let me do everything that I can to return this position someday better than I found it. And I think what that does is that brings a sense of humility. It brings a sense of seasonality, like this is a wonderful season of my life, but recognizing that it is a season. And it keeps things in proper perspective. And the last thing, and this is one of my favorite verses, Isaiah 26:12. It's a wonderful perspective shifter. It says, all that we have accomplished, God, you have done for us.
Amen.
And so you look back and, you know, we can maybe pull a muscle trying to pat ourselves on the back, but no. God went before us and he's made the way, and we could spend the rest of the afternoon sharing stories about that.
So I love how you said in your very first part about God giving your time back. I think sometimes people would hear that and be like, well, I don't really know what you mean. So could you explain that and maybe give an example of how you found when you put God first, even when you, like you said, you could be answering emails, you could be meetings. I mean, I'm sure there's always something at the radio station that you could be dealing with. What ways have you seen him, when you put him first, make the space and create the time you need to accomplish everything?
Well, I'll try, but I don't think it's completely explainable. I mean, you remember the Old Testament story of the widow with the jar of oil and the miraculous story that Elisha said, well, keep filling empty jars with that one bottle of oil. And it just kept going and going and going and going. And it's like, you can't explain that away in human terms. So when I talk about God bringing the time back, it's if I spend 30 minutes in the Word and in prayer, God has this miraculous way of maybe making 30 minutes elsewhere in the day evaporate the work that would have consumed my time. And he kind of clears that schedule if we put him first. It's kind of that Matthew 6:33, right? Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then all these other things will be added to you.
I love that. He is such a faithful God.
He is.
So you just can't outdo him, man. Those jars keep going and pouring and pouring. Okay, so after years in ministry and media, would you say your calling has evolved?
Yes. Because I think as God grows us, he begins to reveal more and more things to us. And part of that revelation is, here's how I've created you. Here's how I want to use you. And the way he wants to use me today may look different than the way he wanted to use me 10 years ago. So yeah, I would absolutely say it's evolved. I think he's given me more and more of a heart over the last 6-7 years of what can I do to prepare the ministry for the future? What can I do to unite the team around a vision, a powerful vision that God has given to us?
So what would you say are the most, how can we say it? The top, let's say, what are the top lessons that God has taught you along this journey?
Number one, humility. Pride is insidious. Like, it just lurks in the corners. If you're not looking for it, it will go completely unnoticed. And it's something a lot of people struggle with. I struggle with it. And so my continual prayer, and what I've learned a lot, is about pride. I'm really good at spotting pride, Miranda, because I've struggled with it and I've wrestled with it enough. So that's number one. Number two is that God goes before us. We were in a major campaign, like a $30 million capital campaign. And man, it got stressful. Like there was this $2 million grant from a foundation that was at risk. And it's like, are we going to get it? We're really wrestling. And in my prayer time, it was like God was saying to me, why are you so stressed about this? I don't want it to fail. Well, what's going to happen if it fails? Well, I'll look like a failure. And then it's like God was saying, well, then is this your vision or is this my vision? And so it brings about this point of surrender.
Right.
Yeah.
Man, that's good. I surely could relate to that. You said that, and I started thinking, I was like, I've had that moment before.
Yeah, well, all of us that are high capacity, highly driven people, we have to. It's a daily surrender, right, to what God wants for us.
Yeah, and I'm learning about my personality that when I have those moments, it's not so much on purpose to be pride. I really want to do well for God. Like, I really sometimes believe He really needs me to do well, and He sends those gentle reminders that I really don't need you to do anything but be available, to be willing, to go, to have faith. And I get those gentle nudges a lot.
Yeah, there was a season too, and this kind of goes along with the pride thing. They say the best leaders will surround themselves with people that are smarter than them.
Yeah.
And there was a season years ago where I would have wanted to make sure that I stay the smartest person in the room, even though that was probably never true. And there's a wonderful freedom that comes to a leader when you're like, not only do I not want to be the smartest person in the room, that's not the best for the organization. And so I'm surrounded by an amazing team of leaders, and they're smarter than me.
Well, in this moment, we're going to say that's a great thing.
Yes.
No, it is a great thing. Okay, so we talked about your wife for just a second, but you've been married to her for 30 years. Is that right?
Yeah, almost 35.
And again, 5 kids, a beautiful family. You think girls are easier than boys. I don't know about all that. So in any job, any career, any passion, there's an issue with prioritizing, right? Even being a teacher, it's sometimes hard to get that right because you bring so much work home with you. So in this environment and what you do and your job title, how do you keep family, faith, and work balanced?
Well, first of all, I am blessed with an amazing wife who will lovingly, and I mean that with all genuineness, she will lovingly point out sometimes when things are getting a little bit out of balance. And I appreciate that so much because she'll speak wisdom and she'll speak truth. My son, who's 20 now, he said that he tells a friend, hey, the decision to go to church on Sunday morning is made Saturday night.
True.
Right?
That's good.
And so the same is in prioritizing, let's face it, we could work, 16, 18 hours a day. The emails never stop. The reading, the articles, the projects, the reports, those things could never stop. You just have to make an intentional decision that, no, I'm going to shut it down at a certain point, and I'm going to focus on my wife, focus on my family, focus on going for a walk or doing whatever. And that's not always easy to do, and I fail many times, but by God's grace, that's what we try to do.
It can be difficult.
Yes.
It can be very difficult. Okay. If you had to give a non-listener, Christian or not, just somebody who doesn't listen to KSBJ or any of the Hope Media platforms, a reason to listen to Christian music on Hope Media, what would it be?
Oh, I'd give a double dog dare. I'd give a triple dog dare.
Oh, we're going old fashioned. Man, you're pulling out the big guns.
You know, we do this in January of each year. We usually do like a 30-day challenge. And so I would say that to somebody who's not familiar with Christian music, to just give it a try. Like you don't have to be a Christian music aficionado. You don't even have to know the artist. You don't have to know the words. But here's what I'll guarantee. If you give it a 30-day try, where that's all you listen to, it will change your outlook on life. It absolutely will. I mean, we've heard it time and time again, thousands of times, because everywhere else you turn, the media and even the music is filled with despair or discouragement or things that maybe get us thinking about things we shouldn't be thinking about, right? And so all of a sudden you start filling your mind with wholesome things, and it has an impact, right? It's like what goes into the mind is what's going to come out in the heart.
Okay, so you're going to appreciate this. 12, 13 years ago, when my husband and I started dating, he challenged me to listen to Christian music for the 30-day challenge. Now, we were in Alabama, and I believe he had done it the month before, and he was like, I really want you to do it. And at this time, I like all music. I still do.
Sure.
And I was a huge John Mayer fan, huge Maroon 5. So that was kind of the idea and where my headspace was. And so because he had done it, and he was very adamant about it, I thought, well, what's it going to hurt, right?
Yeah.
It can't hurt anything. So I take the challenge, and I'm not kidding. It's 10 years later, and the challenge has not ended.
Nice.
Matter of fact, it was such a drastic change that, and it's happened over the 10 years. Like it didn't just happen overnight, but I listened to it more, right, during that period. And then when I would listen to other music, I would notice that I would feel differently.
Yeah.
I would notice that I would think differently. And it was subtle, right? So at first it wasn't really that big of a deal, but I noticed it, and I was trying to figure out, what is this, right? And then as the years passed, then it became more obvious, especially when we moved here in Houston traffic, and I'd be listening to music that was less loving, and I would notice that I would become a little less loving, or I'd become a little more antsy and jumpy, a little more...
Road rage.
I didn't say that. A little more aggressive,
Yes.
maybe. And then just probably in the last 5 years, I realized that I really just couldn't listen to it at all. I totally couldn't even go from 98% of listening to Christian music to 2% because of how quickly the change in me happened.
I can give you a great example. I love this story on our Christian hip hop and pop station called Engine. One time, one of the spots used a little bit of the melody of a mainstream song. Now, keep in mind, all the songs on Engine, Christian, hip hop, and pop, we had a listener contact us and say, can you please take that spot off the air? Because I listened for the music that you play. And when I heard that little clip of that little melody from a mainstream song, it brought back all these memories and this feelings that I'm trying to get rid of.
So true.
So it does have such a powerful impact.
I now secular music's more if I'm playing pickleball with the girls on Tuesday night, but I can immediately we've actually got away from music for different reasons, but I would leave there and come home and have to like I don't even know how to say it. I would just be so different. And so music, what you said, what you put in is extremely impactful to your life.
It is.
Extremely. So I love that you brought that up because that's my 30-day challenge story.
Nice.
Now,
Nice.
Joe, I may have pulled a little fast one. So in your notes, it says we're ending, but in my notes, it says we're not. I have a little segment here called On the Spot. And I in preparing for the show, I may have called in a little help, and I may have done a little recon work.
Uh-oh.
And so I want to share a few things with you and also put you on the spot.
Okay.
And I'm probably going to have to read. I'm not even ready. I'm going to have to read directly because I don't want to mess up what was said, and I don't want to use my own words. So Carter from KSBJ Morning Show said that you are one of, if not the most personal and caring leaders that he has ever worked for. He says that you have such a great vision for the direction of the company, and you always have time to shoot the breeze with everyone. Plus, he goes on to say that you remember the details of people's lives that you've discussed with them in the past, and it makes them feel heard. Then he mentions that the most important thing about you is that you love, in big letters, dad jokes. So I feel like that there's a story here and that you may want to share with us a dad joke. I don't know. Do with it what you want.
Well, first of all, Carter's comments, very, very kind, and I'm humbled by those. But he's the one that inspires us with dad jokes. But I will ask you, why did the cows go to New York City?
Oh, wow.
Because they wanted to see the musicals.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, that's a dad joke. I love it. Okay. Rochelle from the morning show, she shared something really special. I want to make sure I even say it right.
Okay.
Joe isn't an average Joe. I'm not even sure how that descriptive moniker came into being because the Joseph from the Old Testament, the guy with the coat, wasn't typical. He was a dreamer. The Joseph, that practically starts the New Testament, Jesus' dad, was honorable and mercifully kind. Jesus gave both these guys incredible tasks, and they rocked them humbly. Joe Paulo was named well. He is a dreamer who dutifully seeks after God and humbly steps into the role that Jesus has bestowed on him. He's the guy that folks want to be in charge. His desire to serve God is authentic and deeply infectious.
Wow.
How do you feel about that?
I don't know what to say about that, except that I aspire to be that way.
Well, you are seen that way. Congratulations.
Wow.
And then last but not least, Chuck Finney, one of Christian radio's top consultants. I'm guessing you know him.
Well, you did go digging.
Told me to ask you about how God speaks to you while you're splitting wood.
Oh, man, what a great story. So our current office before we move is in Humble, Texas.
Yep.
Humble. And when I came here for an interview, I was leaving to go to a men's retreat at Chuck's place in Colorado. And I'm walking into the cabin where we're staying, and there's some decorative crosses on the wall, and the one right at eye level. Now, I had just come from Humble, Texas, and I'm like praying through it. My wife and I are discussing, should we move to the Houston area? Should we take this job? And this cross at eye level, in the middle of the cross, it says joy. And in the upper left-hand corner of the cross, it says humble. And it was like God was saying, you're going to find joy in humble. And there were other things, and actually God used Chuck to speak into my life some great wisdom, but pointed us here.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. So now we really are going to close. Okay. So you've mentioned several scriptures. You mentioned one that was one of your favorites, but do you have like a favorite life verse?
Yes. Jeremiah 9:23 and 24. Let not the wise man boast of his wisdom, or the rich man boast of his riches, or the strong man boast in his strength, but let him who boasts boast in this, that he knows me, for I am the Lord who exercises kindness and justice in all the earth.
So good.
So if I'm going to boast, that's what I want to boast in.
If I'm going to boast, that's going to be it. Okay, so any last thoughts, encouragement, anything you'd like to share with our listeners?
You know what? It's such a privilege when you get to do something that you feel called to do and you are passionate about, and that's what we get to do every day. That's what I get to do every day. Certainly there's challenges, but we look at them as opportunities, and it's such a pleasure. And thank you so much for letting me come today. This is great.
Thank you so much for coming today.
Man,
I am so honored.
Anytime I get to talk about what God's doing through the ministry, I'm going to jump on that opportunity.
I love it. Well, I think this is a great way to wrap up today. Again, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, your stories, your funny stories, your life stories. We are so grateful to hear how Hope Media is growing, and we look forward to seeing what the future holds for Hope Media and the Houston area in general, as far as sharing God's love.
Me too.
All right, great. Thanks for coming. I'm going to catch up with you soon.
All right.
All right. Thank you for joining us today on Southern Soul Chats and for being a part of our summer series, Stories of Faith. Joe Paulo's journey is such a powerful reminder of how faith can transform challenges into incredible opportunities for God's glory. If Joe's story inspired you, we encourage you to support Hope Media Group through prayer and/or donations. Every effort helps spread the message of God's love. You can also connect with Joe's work and experience uplifting content through 89.3 KSBJ right here in Houston, or stream it online or through Hope Media's app. Discover more about how Hope Media is transforming lives by visiting their website, linked in the resources section below. As always, do not forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on your favorite platforms. And if you've been blessed by Southern Soul Chats, we'd love for you to consider supporting our ministry as well. Your donation helps us to continue sharing these stories of faith and equipping others to step forward in their walk with God. You can donate on our website or simply share this episode to inspire others. Now, before we wrap up, let's remember this. When we place every part of our lives in God's hands, He transforms our struggles into testimonies of faithfulness. Join us next week for another powerful story of faith. Until then, keep stepping forward with courage, letting your faith shine, and trust that God is working through you. Bye, y'all.